The Chaco War was one of the deadliest wars in world history. It is estimated that between 3 and 4 million people died during the conflict. And to put that number into perspective, that's about the same amount of people as died during World War I. The Chaco War was a war between Bolivia and Paraguay over disputed territory in the Gran Chaco region of South America. This left a huge chunk of land without a defined owner. During this time period, Latin American countries often used foreign military advisors to help modernize their armed forces. And in the case of Bolivia, they had hired a German colonel named Alexander von Mahler. The Bolivian army, under the command of General Jose Maria Vera, had set up a defensive position at Bacarin, a strategic location that controlled the road to Fort Sargento. The Paraguayan army, on the other hand, was led by Colonel Juan Francisco Avieta, who was confident in his troops' ability to capture the fort. After days of heavy fighting, the Bolivians were forced to retreat, allowing the Paraguayans to capture the fort and forcing the Bolivians to retreat further. Von Marlow had previously served in the German army during the First World War. After the war, he became an advisor to the Bolivian army. Bolivia was awarded 18,000 square miles of land, while Paraguay was awarded 20,000 square miles. While the treaty brought an end to the fighting, it did little to ease the tension between the two countries. Both sides continued to claim the entire Chaco region as their own, and the fighting could easily have broken out again. As the war dragged on, the Bolivians realized that they needed a new strategy if they were going to win the war. They also agreed to settle their differences peacefully in the future. The Bolivian and Paraguayan armies were not prepared to deal with the large numbers of wounded soldiers that resulted from the intense fighting. The armies of Bolivia and Paraguay relied heavily on outdated strategies and formations that were not effective against the modern weapons and equipment being used by the other side. This led to heavy casualties as soldiers were mowed down by machine guns and artillery fire without being able to effectively defend themselves. It serves as a reminder of the importance of peaceful conflict resolution and the need to invest in diplomacy and dialogue rather than military force. Rather than relying on military force, the leaders of Bolivia and Paraguay should have worked to find a peaceful solution to their border dispute. This could have saved the countless lives that were lost during the war and prevented the long-term animosity between the two countries. The outdated tactics and lack of training among the troops contributed to the high death toll and prolonged the conflict. By learning from the mistakes of the past, we can work toward a future where such a devastating war never repeats itself. Investing in training and equipping soldiers with the necessary skills and equipment could have resulted in a shorter and less deadly war. Furthermore, the war also highlights the impact that foreign intervention can have on regional conflicts and the need for international cooperation in addressing such issues. The lack of medical care during the Chaco War resulted in a high number of deaths from preventable causes. If the armies had been better equipped to deal with the wounded, many lives could have been saved and the war may have ended sooner. Furthermore, the lack of training and experience among the troops also contributed to the high death toll as soldiers were not prepared for the intensity and brutality of modern warfare. As a result, many soldiers died from preventable causes such as infection and disease. Additionally, the lack of medical care also led to a breakdown in the chain of command as officers were often too busy trying to take care of the wounded to effectively lead their troops. This further contributed to the chaos and confusion of the battlefield, making it even more dangerous for the soldiers involved. However, in recent years, there has been a renewed interest in the conflict. As mentioned before, both Bolivia and Paraguay received military and financial aid from other countries. This led to friendly fire incidents, as well as missed opportunities to end the conflict more quickly. As the war dragged on and casualties mounted, the pressure on both sides to find a solution to the conflict increased. Ultimately, the war ended with the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, which divided the Chaco region between Bolivia and Paraguay. However, the legacy of the Chaco War continues to be felt in the region today. This raises questions about the extent to which the war was a proxy conflict between foreign powers and the role that foreign intervention played in the outbreak and duration of the war. Additionally, historians are also investigating the impact of the war on the development of both Bolivia and Paraguay. The war had a devastating toll on both countries, killing hundreds of thousands of people and leaving them in a state of economic and political turmoil. By studying the war's aftermath, historians can gain a better understanding of how these countries have developed and the challenges they have faced in the years since the conflict ended. Historians are now taking a fresh look at the war and its causes, as well as the role that foreign powers played in the conflict. They are also exploring the lasting effects of the war on both Bolivia and Paraguay, as well as the broader implications for the region as a whole. In an attempt to turn the tide of the war, Paraguay turned to Italy for help. Despite the setbacks, the Bolivians remained determined to win the war. The war was one of the deadliest in Latin American history, and the violence of the conflict continues to be felt in the region today. By examining the causes and consequences of the war, historians can work toward a better understanding of the roots of violence and work to prevent similar conflicts from happening in the future. They continued to fight fiercely against the Paraguayans, refusing to give up. At this point, the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini was looking for ways to expand his power and influence around the world, and he saw an opportunity to do so in Paraguay. Mussolini agreed to send military advisors and supplies to Paraguay, hoping that they would be able to turn the tide of the war in their favor. They decided to appoint General Vere as commander-in-chief of the army, giving him full authority over military operations. Under Vere's leadership, the Bolivians began to take the offensive, pushing the Paraguayans back across the Chaco. He recommended that Bolivia begin building up its military and stockpiling weapons in preparation for a future war with Paraguay. Both Bolivia and Paraguay saw this as an opportunity to gain more territory, and they began to fight over the region. Things would remain relatively calm for almost 50 years until things got heated again. Both sides were willing to do whatever it took to win the war, no matter the cost. The war would last for 3 long years, with neither side being able to gain a decisive victory. The fighting would eventually come to an end with the signing of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship on June 1935. While today the area is mostly flat, dry land, during the 19th century, it was seen as a potentially rich agricultural region, and both Bolivia and Paraguay wanted it. This led to border disputes when each country began to develop their claims to the region. But the Chaco War lasted only about 3 years and was fought between two relatively unknown countries. So how did this happen? In today's video, we are going to take a look at the Chaco War, also known as the Gran Chaco War, in 1864. During the Paraguayan War, the western borders of Paraguay were pushed back by the combined forces of Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. By the 1920s, there had been many attempts at resolving the issue diplomatically, but each attempt failed and the situation began to get more and more tense. In 1927, war would finally break out. On this day in history, the Chaco War would begin. On this day, July 1927, Paraguayan troops would invade into disputed territories. Unlike many other conflicts around the world, the war began not with a large-scale invasion or battle, but rather with a series of small skirmishes. Over the next few weeks, both sides would send reinforcements and the fighting would intensify. The first major engagement of the war came at the Battle of Baccarin, which took place on August 1927. Throughout the early stages of the war, neither side was able to achieve any major victories. As the Bolivians gained ground, the Paraguayans became increasingly desperate. With the help of the Italians, the Paraguayans were able to launch a counter-offensive, pushing the Bolivians back from the territory that they had gained earlier in the war. As the war continued, the fighting became more and more intense. Under the terms of the treaty, the Chaco region was divided between Bolivia and Paraguay. To prevent this, the two countries agreed to demilitarize the border area and to establish a neutral zone between them. As the world began to recover from the devastation of World War II, the memory of the Chaco War was largely forgotten. One of the most interesting aspects of the Chaco War is the role that foreign powers played in the conflict. Another important aspect of the Chaco War is the legacy of violence that it left in its wake. One of the biggest reasons that the Chaco War was so deadly was the lack of medical care for the soldiers. Another reason that the Chaco War was so deadly was the use of outdated military tactics. In addition to the medical and tactical issues, the Chaco War was also marked by a lack of communication and coordination between the two armies. Despite the efforts to move past the conflict, the memory of the war and its devastating toll on both countries remains strong. So what can we learn from the Chaco War? One lesson is the importance of investing in diplomacy and conflict resolution. Another lesson is the need to invest in healthcare and medical care for soldiers. Finally, the Chaco War teaches us the importance of military training and preparation. In conclusion, the Chaco War was a tragic conflict that had a lasting impact on Bolivia, Paraguay, and the region as a whole. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.